morning, good afternoon. Thank you for taking the time to join us today for this webcast with Epicor software on taking control of the budget process with Epicor Financial Planner. My name is Chris Purcell. I'm the Product Marketing Manager for Financial Management Solutions here at Epicor. And joining me today, I'm delighted to say, is Brian Maynard, one of the team leads from our Solution Engineers team, who's going to take us through and give you guys a look at the product firsthand. So I'm going to make an assumption today as we start off the webcast around the current situation. And I think the current situation for most people on this call, and hence why you're probably interested in understanding how we can simplify and help with the budget process, is that you're probably either using Excel spreadsheets to manage the budget process, or you possibly have a structured planning solution, probably a slightly more older product, maybe a product like Active Planner, for example. And the current situation is that Excel Excel's a great tool. I love Excel, but it is limited when it comes to looking at the budget process. And I'm guessing the reason why there are so many of you that have joined us today is that you understand the pain points behind this, in terms of the fact that having all these various different spreadsheets, the huge file sizes that you get, the fact that with all these spreadsheets you're then having to collate, that it's a very error-prone process. And as finance personnel, either you or someone in your team has a delightful task of collating all this information back together. So what I'm going to talk about today is Excel hell, and how we can escape that. So we're going to look a little bit in terms of what Excel hell is, and why it's a pain point for organizations. Introduce you to the Epicor Financial Planner solution, and how that offers the best of both worlds when it comes to really dealing with the situation and the budgeting and forecasting process. Then Brian's going to take us through the product. We're going to see it in action. You're going to get a great feel for how the solution can help you and your businesses. And obviously, as with all these webcasts we do, that feel free to ask questions. I'm delighted to answer any questions that you have about the product. Either in the panel at the top or on the right-hand side, you should see a Q&A box. So as we go through the presentation, please feel free to type into that Q&A box any questions as they come to mind, and I'll endeavor to get through as many of those as we can at the end of the session. The webcast obviously being recorded as well, so after this session you will receive a link to this recording, which you can then watch again at your leisure or share with other colleagues in your environment. So Excel hell, what is it, and why is Excel such a pain point when it comes to budgeting and reporting process? As I said, I love Excel. My profession before I got into doing product marketing and helping develop the product for Epicor is I was an accountant, and I love Excel. So Excel is great if you're wanting to do some quick analysis on information. You want to get some information out of a system, and you want to check the information in there, or you want to maybe present information in a certain way. But what Excel is not great for, it isn't great for a collaborative process. So we'll talk a bit more about that in a bit more detail in a minute. But it has very much limitations when it comes to giving management and giving people within the organization the information that they need, and is definitely not a tool to manage processes. It's a statistical analysis tool. And then as you get down to looking at various multi-dimensional performance analytics, it really starts to struggle. So the 9 circles of Excel hell, as I refer to them as, the first circle is the oops circle. Now, as I say, Excel is a great tool, but it's a very fragile tool. In a shared ecosystem of spreadsheets, it's all too easy for people to delete rows, delete cells, break formulas and links. Excel just isn't made for sharing. It's to be used individually. And accidental deletions, in fact, in Excel, are behind some of the greatest related corporate disasters in the world today. The second circle is the crush circle. Epicor is a huge pain to consolidate, and how many finance professionals really relish the prospect of spending weeks consolidating, I don't know, 50 plus departmental plans into a single master plan? And as for trying to produce a rolling forecast with anything like the business frequency needs, well, it's just not going to happen. You've got the brain drain. Excel wastes so much time. We conducted a survey with a company called Vedantis last year, and we actually found out that most finance people who work in spreadsheets are spending about 12 hours a month simply updating their spreadsheets. It's a zero value add task. And I don't know about you, but I don't think you, I, or any of your team really spent the years earning their accountancy degrees and MBAs and honing their strategic analytics skills to spend half their professional lives collecting and consolidating spreadsheets. It's a soul-destroying and, let's be honest, business-inhibiting task. Then you've got the fact that finger in the air circle. Excel's not good for real-time data. It can only ever provide a historical snapshot of the numbers at a single point in time, and the results, you're always chasing after the latest number for anyone who needs to know the current position against the plan, budget, or forecast. Circle 5, the import duties. It's hard to get data into Excel. If you spend hours laboriously exporting operational data from your GL, your payroll, purchasing, or other system and manually configure it into Excel, you'll know there has to be an easier way. You've got Circle 6, the group growth. Excel is many things, but it's not a management information system. It may be serviceable for analytics, as long as they're just for you. But if you want senior executives and departmental managers to have management dashboards and run their own reports, e.g. to compare actual performance with forecast performance or to run what-if analysis, Excel's not your friend. Circle 7, the flatland. Excel is so two-dimensional. If you want to model something like profitability by product line, Excel's great. But if you want to be able to know what, or model something like the impact of a 5% pay rise to a single department and understand how that will impact every department as well as the P&L, the cash flow, and the balance sheet, you're in for a world of hurt. And the more dimensions your data has, the less you'll want to wrestle with it in Excel. The whodunit circle. So when you have a lot of people updating in an Excel spreadsheet, it becomes impossible to tell where changes have been made, who made them, and when. The audit trail goes cold real fast. And that's not good for governance, it's not good for efficiency, or really investigating the source of mistakes and inaccuracies. Then the ninth circle is the global challenge. Excel is frustrating enough when you're only dealing in one currency and one fiscal regime. If you have to take into account for multiple currencies, exchange rate fluctuations, and the vagaries of national and international taxation, your consolidation, forecasting, budgeting, and reporting activities enter a whole new dimension of complexity, and one which Excel is entirely unsuited. So that's what leads me to introducing Epicore Financial Planner and taking the tool that we all use for our budgeting and planning purposes, even though we know it's not fit for purpose, and really taking that and delivering it to the next level. How do we ascend those 9 circles? What is great about Epicore Financial Planner is that, despite what I've been saying, the front end of it is 100% Excel UI, which is fantastic for end users because end users know Excel. They're used to using Excel, but what it does do that Excel can't do is it delivers that complete workflow automation. You're not having to manage that process outside of any system controls, and actually being able to control this through the system itself and manage that workflow and define that workflow and approval hierarchies within the system. So it has the ability to carry out multiple book support, multiple currency support. You can have version control in there. So you want to create multiple versions, you want to do some reforecasting, you can. You want to have comprehensive security around what users are allowed to see and what departments are allowed to enter budgets for, maybe what accounts they're allowed to enter budgets for. You can do that as well. And then it has the ability to do things like detail level budgeting. So if you want to have information behind what makes up an account balance in the budget tracker, you can, and you can see those details levels. The system comes pre-populated with some various templates, and I'm pretty sure you'll see them in a minute when Brian gets his hands on the system and can show you it in anger that come pre-packaged, that can be tailored to suit your needs. So what is it? What's behind it? What makes it so different? And what it really is it's a robust SQL Server storage. So you've got one version of the business data. You're simply using these less complex, these more focused Excel sheets to enter the information into a SQL Server storage. So Excel becomes a data entry tool rather than the data storage. But what it's great for is the fact that it leverages the Excel skills that you have now. Everything that you can do in Excel today, you can still do in Epicore Financial Planner because it is utilizing Excel as that powerful front end. As I mentioned, you can predefine the workflow. There's three different types of user within the system. A budget administrator who will go in there and obviously set up the areas of responsibility, set up that workflow that I spoke about, determine who's going to be approvals, what deadlines should be put in the system, configure various validation rules behind the process if you so wish, and then you have people who can then submit budgets. They can use the spreading methods. They can use the Excel formulas and functionality in the system to fill out their budgets or bring in last year's actual information if they so wish, to help them create the budgets for the new period. And then you have an approver user who's simply just someone who has the ability to be in the system to actually just approve budgets but has no control over actually any of the entering of information. It's an easy role-based menu. As I said, it is Excel to all intents and purposes, and what you'll see is you'll get a new ribbon in the Excel add-in that will have, depending on your access levels, defined by what role you've been assigned in, as you saw in the previous screen, from a modeler, a submitter, or an approver. You'll get a different screen that will then only give you access to the information that's pertinent to you, whether it's in this case, load some data, going into entering a budget. You want to see a workflow status report. In this case, it's the designer, so they can see where the status of all the various budgets that have gone around the organization are at, who's completed theirs, who's in progress, who's yet to start. Another great feature that's been added that's a great tool that would be brilliant to have this in standard Excel is the ability to spread information based on any type of requirement you need. There's some pre-set up spreading methods in there, 1x12, 4x5, retro calculations. You want to do it based on last year's actuals. You want to do it based on last year's actuals with a percentage increase. You can do that within the EFP framework, which makes the whole process of actually entering this budget information a lot simpler and a lot easier. As I said, budget level security. You define in the system who has access to which accounts, which departments do you want people to be able to enter information for. So in my case, I might be entering information for the product marketing department, and Brian entering information for the solutions engineers, and then they obviously all feed back together into the master budget, but I can only see the information that I've been allowed access to. As I said, if there are active planner customers out there, Epicore is offering a migration to the Epicor Financial Planner solution. There is no plan to retire Active Planner. It's a great solution and has been for many people, and many people are happy using it. So the timing is very much your choice on that front, but it's just to let you know that this is out there. So I'm going to hand over to Brian, and let him show you the product that we've spoken about so far. So over to you, Brian.
All right, thank you very much, Chris. Okay, so I've come into Microsoft Excel, just loaded it up in a new Excel, and you can see at the top there's an Epicor Planner tab. So we can go in and we can log in, and then we're going to select the model. So EFP in its base version comes with a model which allows you to draw on GL actual data in the creation of budgets. But it can also be configured to allow you to draw on other data from your Epicor ERP for budgeting purposes. So as I've logged into the application, you can see I now have an EFP specific ribbon, as Chris was showing in his PowerPoint. I have, for demoing purposes, I have access to both the admin functions and the end user budget tasks. We won't spend a lot of time on the admin side of the application. But one thing we will take a look at is how you can set up separate forecasts. So if you want to have different budgets or forecasts, for example, what I'm going to show is how we can reforecast at the end of, say, each quarter, and then revise our budget if we wish using those different forecast scenarios. So we'll talk about that. As an end user, I'm typically going to come in and go into my budget tasks. And primarily, I'm going to be in this area where I want to go ahead and start working with my budgets. So one thing to note is the budgets are all starting out with a ready-to-complete status. But as we work on the budgets and submit them for approval, and they get approved or rejected, they'll be tracked according to that status, and you actually can see the budgets represented by those statuses down below. And if you want to filter based on a particular status, then you can use these radio buttons to do that if you have a long list of budgets. Another thing to note is we've set up for demonstration purposes, we've set up a budget driver to be an entity. So I'm coming in as someone who is responsible for this LE14 entity. And that could be a cost center, profit center, department, division, region, company, whatever level you want to set up. And I could have responsibility for more than one entity. And so I may have responsibility to update my budget, the same budget, across multiple different entities. So what we're seeing here are some sample templates that you get with the product. What we're trying to show here is some different examples of how you can use this product for budgeting purposes. So I'm going to start out by looking at how we can do unit-based budgeting and have that translated into financial revenue figures. So I'm going to open up my sales by product budget. So the main thing to note is that although we're using Excel as the UI, so as the input schedules for budget information, the budget is actually being stored at the server level in the data model, the underlying OLAP cube. And so any changes that I make to this particular input schedule get sent back to the server. And then I can refresh to see those changes in action. The other thing to note is you can define which cells are updatable in the input schedule. So the cells that are shaded yellow are the ones that I can edit. You can, unless you protect the other cells, I could still go in and change the values in the other cells. But when I try and send those changes back to the server and refresh my view here, the numbers will be refreshed back to what they were. So in this case, we're entering units in the top section of this particular input schedule. Those units are being used to calculate product sales revenue in the middle part of the schedule. And the bottom section, that's where we're seeing the unit revenue figures that are being used for that calculation. So we just do this for demonstration purposes. So for example, if I'm going to add 5 units of this particular product, limo product, so we're using an automotive example here for demonstration purposes. If I go in and enter, say, 5 units where I had none before, and send this back to the server, you can see it displays a little icon here to let me know that it's updating the server. And then once that updating is finished, I can make one or multiple changes through the same updating process. Then once it's finished, then I'll be able to refresh my data and see the figures updated and see whatever calculations are configured at the server level take place here. So when I go and refresh this particular sheet, then I'm going to see how it's taken my unit price here, multiplied it by the units that I've entered, and come up with sales revenue. So a very simple calculation, but those calculations can be configured to perform whatever calculations you need to perform. They can be configured at the server level to perform consolidations as well. In this case, I've just added just over $200,000 of revenue for the period of April for this particular product line called limos. And so it's taken my total sales revenue for April up to $1.022188, so just over $1 million. Those business rules can also take these inputs and use them in other calculations that update the values that other users would see in their input schedules. Now, if I want to save this as a new version, I can go ahead and do that. You can have any number of versions of your budget. If I want to submit this for approval, the approval submission process can be scheduled, or I can go ahead and enforce it at any particular time. There can also be email notification to let the approvers know. And then once I've submitted this for approval, then my cells are now white. They're basically locked down. I can't make any other further changes unless maybe the approver rejects it and it comes back to me in a state which allows me to then make further changes and resubmit. As I close this particular input schedule, we go back to our initial list and we can see that the status of this input schedule is now submitted. If I come into another schedule, this one in more of an HR context as an example, we're just trying to show that you have the ability to vary the context in which budgeting is done. The previous input schedule had me entering units, and it was calculating product sales revenue from those units. In this case, we're looking at salary expenses, and we're actually budgeting on in this case, we're budgeting on an individual person level. This could also be done in a position context, and this is set up to allow me to make some easy recalculations. So if I'm going to give Lewis here a raise, say 5%, then I can do that, and it increases each of the periods by 5%. If I only want that to happen in period 5, then I can go ahead and put an effective date of period 5, and you can see it now updates his salary from May through the rest of the year. If I want to add additional people, then I'm really just pulling from additional values that have been set up within the underlying model, and so I can go ahead and add additional people as required. Okay. So again, just a different context in which you're doing your budgeting. If I close this, having made some changes, but I still want to go back in and make some more changes at a later point, then you can see the status is in progress. I haven't submitted it yet. I can go back and make further changes to it. This first budget here is an example of more of a budget at the natural account level in the general ledger. And you can see here my product sales budget I was working with earlier rolls up to this external sales account 4,000 on the first row. So you can see my revised figure for April of $1,022,188. So again, that's just an example of the types of business rules that you can configure behind the scenes within the model that the end user may or may not be aware of, where you're taking their inputs and performing calculations and either presenting results back to them or to others. Also, in this particular input schedule, you can see that some of the cells are shaded. You do have the ability to capture comments as well. So you can put in whatever you want to put in as a comment. And then it will highlight the fact that cell has a comment associated with it. What you can also do is highlight a particular row. Let's say I want to break out my raw materials budgeting into more detail. beyond the figures that we're presenting here at the period level, I can use this line item detail button here to open up a more detailed input schedule that allows me to then take the numbers that we had at the account level that are shown in the blue row at the bottom. And now if I want to break those out into more detail, either to maybe validate that these numbers are correct or to allocate these numbers at a sub-account level in some fashion, then there's different ways that I can do that. If I just want to allocate on a percentage basis, then I can put my percentages in, and I can say go ahead and apply that budget on a percentage basis. It's taken these numbers and just allocated them across. In this case, maybe there's 4 primary raw materials in my operation that comprise the bulk of the costs. This allows me to see what I'm allocating down to that level of detail. Or I have the ability to go and make changes here. So if I want to put in some numbers and go ahead and apply these numbers as my budget figures using the spread that we'd already defined by the account level budgets at the higher level input schedule, now you can see I'm basically recalculating my budgets, but allocating them based on the prior year's actual, which is the basis for this particular budget scenario. And down at the bottom in the white row, I'm able to see the difference. So I still have additional money to be reallocated if my goal is to try and explain the figures on the blue row. Or maybe I'm using this to build up my budget from first principles. So whatever new total I come up with, I'm going to go ahead and update my source, which will take this back to my top level there. So just going back to that particular budget for a second here. So I want to show you some other things that the user can do. So if I actually I'll go to the spreading a little bit later. What I'm going to do is just close out of this for now. And some of the things that the users can do is they can also run some reports. There's some built-in reports, like a comment report. So I don't have to go into each of the budgets to see the comments that have been added. I can see the comments listed in summary form here. There's also the ability to see status report. So you can see I have the one input schedule, the one budget, sales by product, which is now at a status of submitted. I have 2 others that are in progress, and then 3 others that I haven't touched. There's also the ability to run reports. Here's a couple of reports that come as default reports out of the box. You also have the mechanism to create your own reports. So if I go and take a look at the first report here, it's going to default in some different member values here, which I may or may not have the ability to change. In my case, I didn't default in a currency, so we'll pick US dollars and we'll run the report. Now I'm seeing my budgets laid out in an income statement format. And so I have product sales. I have that coming down to a cost of goods sold, calculating gross margin, my expenses, down to my net income down at the bottom. What you can do in these reports is you can drill down on them. So I can right-click and investigate. And I can say, let's drill down on our products to all levels. So now I'm seeing how that total product sales is broken down. And it's showing me subtotals as well that have been set up in the underlying data model. So I have subtotals by auto, by truck, and by other. You can also have reports where you're comparing budget versus actual, calculating variances. So if I go and run this report, you can see the only change we made was to that revenue figure by adding those 5 units of the limo product line. And so the only place where I have a variation between my budget and actual is in the total revenue, because again, the model that we're using here starts out with last year's actuals as the initial values for this year's budget. So I only made a change in one place, so we're seeing that reflected here in terms of the variance percentage. You have the ability to create your own reports as well. And when you do, you can obviously define who can create those reports. They can be added right into this view here as part of the shared library of reports in the system. Okay. So to show you some of the other functionality, what I'm going to do is change the scenario. So I'm going to come in here and say, we've now moved along in the year. We're now at the end of the first quarter, and we're going to go to our forecast 1 scenario, which is basically being copied from our budget scenario, which we were just working with. But the starting period is period 4 of my calendar fiscal year. So I'm going to make forecast 1 the active scenario. So I'll go ahead and save that and close. And then as the administrator, I'm the one that does that changes the forecast. I'm also the person who then runs the workflow to reset all of the budgets to this new forecast. So I'm going to go ahead and run that workflow. And that'll take a few seconds here. So this is something the administrator would do behind the scenes. And then once this is done, the end users would come in and they would, as usual, go into their budget, but now they can see they're working with forecast 1 and all the budgets are back to the ready to complete status. So if I come into the first budget here that we were just looking at, we see the first 3 periods are now displayed in white because those figures are locked down. These are our actual figures for the first 3 months of the year. So when we look at reforecasting our budget as part of this forecast 1 scenario, we're only working with our budget figures for the remainder of the year. And you can see again, I'm still using the revised budget figure for April for sales that we saw before, because this scenario is a copy of the budget scenario, but locking down the first 3 periods and displaying actuals in the first 3 periods. Okay. So now if I highlight a row and I'd like to perform some calculations, I can do that using some of the buttons up at the top. I can perform spreading. I can copy values to the right. I can copy last year's actual. I can also lock or unlock any particular cells or groups of cells. So for example, maybe since I've revised this relatively recently, we want to lock April. We don't want to change April. But otherwise, I could see my last year's actuals for revenue were $7.5 million. We're now projecting, budgeting $7.9 million, or that's our forecast number based on the first 3 months of actuals and the budget for the remaining 9 months. Our total would be $7.9 million. If we want to change this, one of the ways we can do that is come in here and say, well, I really think we can hit 8 million. So I'm going to put in 8 million. And I'm going to pick a spreading method. And what I can do is use the same proportions as last year and go ahead and spread that. So now my budget total is 8 million, and it's proportionately added the difference to the periods from May through December because I locked April, and by definition, January, February, and March are locked because they represent the actual numbers. Or if I wanted to come out and say, let's spread it, but I want to spread it based on last year, use the same amounts but increase them by, say, 5%. Then I can go ahead and do that. Now I didn't lock down this time. I didn't lock my April figure, so now we're back to taking the last year's actual figure and increasing it by 5%. And if we do that for the remaining 9 periods, that gets us up to a 7.9 million figure. I didn't specify what I wanted there. I just said take last year and add 5%. So there's different ways you can use the different spreads. These are all the ones that come out of the box, but you have the ability to create your own spreading rules as well in the application. Okay. And as you can see in the ribbon here, I'm in as an administrative user. I'm the person who's responsible for this set of budgets. I'm also the approver for demonstration purposes, but that is something that, again, that is controlled by the administrator of the application. You can set up any number of these schedules. One other thing that I'll show here, if I go back in as the administrator, so I'll just close this out here. If we go and look at our schedules here, these are the sample schedules that come with the application that we've been taking a look at. If you want to add new schedules, it's very easy to do. If you want to create schedules in either a list view or an expand view, what these buttons are referring to is the ability to go out and use your data from your underlying data model and add a new schedule and use whatever dimension you're using in that model to set the context for the input schedule that you're trying to create. And list allows me to select specific values. Expand is going to allow me to select a node in the tree structure and pull in everything underneath that particular node. So for example, if I want to come in here and say, let's create a new schedule, because I'm in the context of this forecast 1, it's still showing me first 3 periods of actuals. That's fine, so you may or may not want to do it in this context. But you can come in here and you can select a specific member. So I have the ability to come in here and select, because I use the list view, I can come in and I can select very specific accounts as to what I want to capture on this particular schedule that I'm creating. So for example, if I want to just pull in expense accounts, then I can take it down to whatever level of detail I want. Maybe I want to pull in travel expense accounts, other types of expense accounts, and say OK. It's automatically pulled them in. I chose to do this using my account dimension. Here's the other dimensions that are set up in the model. So you may have client dimensions, you may have cost center dimensions, currency dimensions, employee dimensions, intercompany dimension to be bringing data in across companies, product dimensions, the scenario dimension is what we've been looking at. This is forecast 1 of that scenario dimension. The time dimension, a couple different time dimensions, version dimension if you have different versions of the budget, the line item detail dimension that we saw before, and the entity dimension, which again you can configure to be whatever you want to call entities in your budgeting process. So I can go ahead and save this, and I can save it right into my workbook so that it then shows up with the other templates if I want to do that. Okay, so I'll just close that down for now. But that's an example of how you have the ability as an administrator to go out and create additional input schedules in different contexts. Again, it's all based on the underlying dimensions that are in the underlying model or data cube. And these dimensions are configurable. So if you want to change any of these dimensions or you want to add other dimensions, you have the ability to do that. Okay. So I know we wanted to leave a lot of time for questions today. So I think at this point I'll stop here. And we can open it up for questions, or I guess go back to Chris before we do that. So I'll make Chris the presenter again.
Thanks, Brian. That was great. Thank you. Where's the slides? There we go. Okay, so Brian showed a great overview of the solution, and I hope a lot of it answered some of the questions we had anyway. However, I have seen quite a few questions come through, which is fantastic. I'll endeavour to get through as many as we can in the time allowable. So one of the first questions we have through, and come through a couple of times as well, is the product available for 905, 702? Is the product available for 3.9, or is it just Epicor 10? So Epicor Financial Planner is available with both Epicor 9, Epicor 10, iScala, and soon to be Enterprise and Profit 21 as well. So I think most people on this call are probably on either E9 or E10 or maybe Vantage. So, yeah, absolutely, it's available with Epicor 9 and 10. So in terms of functionality questions around the product, questions had is, can you create 500 departmental sheets at a time? So I think as Brian kind of covered there at the end, you don't really create a different sheet for each department. What you do is you define an input schedule once, which is obviously a great advantage on the setup side as an admin for this tool. You create the schedule that you want to be updated one time, and then the access rights of a particular user that you've then assigned, or how you define the workflow. You might have more than one person entering into a particular departmental code, say, is how you define the workflow then means that the input schedules that are going into that template, it goes out to 500 different departments, say. So that front sheet, that template, whoever, depending on who logs in or who gets the sheet built for them, that's what they see. They only get to enter the information for their department. So you're not actually going out and creating 500 separate worksheets for the various different departments. Another question about it is, can you connect the sheets? How's this done? So again, the sheets themselves aren't connected because the sheets are a data input tool in effect. So as you saw Brian entering some account level or some detail level and account level information, that would then get submitted back to the server. If you then went up to a sheet that would also maybe taking the information from, say the payroll cost that Brian was entering, you then went and brought up the account level details, the salary information that he's entered in those payroll sheets would have then updated the GL information for the departmental payroll costs on that particular sheet. So the sheets themselves aren't actually interlinked, but the information that you send back to the system from one sheet will update a subsequent sheet when you go in and open that up. Can you do salary planning at a departmental level as well as an individual level? Yeah, absolutely. So the example that we had in there is a template example for doing the salary planning at the employee level, but you can define whatever model you want. If you want to do salary planning at a departmental level, then absolutely, you can remove that step of doing it at the individual level entirely and do the planning at the departmental level. Another question is, can you show us the formula bar? And I guess so. Okay, so I think in the demo maybe the formula bar was missing, but I think that's probably I know it's entirely a personal preference on how you use Excel. If you're in Excel, you can simply click on the view, and there's a tick box for formula bar, and I guess it would probably untick that in this situation. But what I'm trying to get at with this is that anything you can do in Excel, you can do in Epicor Financial Planner. If you want the formula bar there, you can have the formula bar there. And you can even use Excel formulas in those cells as calculations to arrive at a number if you want. And then when you push it back to the server, it will turn that back into a number and store it in the system as a number for you. Can I keep both budget one and forecast one at the same time? Yes, absolutely. So in the product you might have seen on Brian's tab, there was a box which was for versioning. So if you click on versioning, you can create a new version of a budget or a forecast, and in your system admin, you can define what the various different version numbers you're going to allow are, whether they're going to be budget one, reforecast one, reforecast two, and so on. So yeah, absolutely, you can carry multiple versions of budgets and plans at any one time. Can a reforecast be set up to cover the following 12 months, i.e. rolling rather than just at the end of the year? Yeah, you can set up a model that will allow you to create a rolling forecast. Again, the examples that were in here are purely just templates we've created for the demo purposes. And actually, think about it, Brian, trying to get the guys to create a rolling 12-month forecast might be a good idea. So hopefully next time you see this, I will have that in there for you. Can I manipulate my spread by specific columns? So yeah, absolutely you can. You can manipulate spread. I think Brian showed down the various locking that you can do in the system. So you can either lock particular columns down if you wanted to do that. Or is the question you want to spread down the page? I've never actually tried it, but apparently yes, we can spread down the page in a column way as well as across the page on the various rows. Okay. Another question, EFP requires AFR? Nope, the two products are very much separate. There's no requirement to have AFR to use EFP or vice versa. Another question about it, or a couple of questions around compatibility is this compatible with Vantage 8? Unfortunately not. Epicor EFP is only available from version 9 and above at this present time. Okay, it's included in Epicor 10. It's an extra model. It's not part of Epicor module. It's not part of Epicor 10, but it's certainly available with it. What is the licensing structure for the product by user, by company? So licensing structure is user based, and it's based on the type of user that you want to have. So most companies would probably have maybe 1, 2 people who are going to be responsible for the design of the budgeting process and the workflow around it and the sheets that you're going to use. And then the majority of the rest of the users are going to be the submitter type users. So there's obviously different prices involved in those two different users, and it is on a user-based situation. Can the budget be imported back into Epicor 9 income statement and balance sheet accounts? So at the present time, the information can't be imported back into Epicor. However, there is a new release that's going to be out in the next month, hopefully by the end of November, which will allow us to push those budgets back into the ERP system. So that is a very exciting enhancement that I'm delighted to say we're going to have in there in the next release of the product. Can data from existing spreadsheets be copied and pasted into the templates to fill in data? Absolutely. As I say, it works in the same way that Excel works today. So if you've got this budget information available, then you can absolutely copy from an existing spreadsheet and paste it directly into the template or into the sheet that you're presented with, and submit that back to the database in that way. Absolutely. Got a question around training manuals and classes availability. So there is a training manual that has been completed and it's available in PDF format. I know Nancy, me and you have spoken on this before, and it has been recently completed, and I can definitely get that sent out to you. It should be available on Epic Web for those who have Epic Web access. Classes, the Epicor University are in the middle of creating a training class for this. For those of you that want to attend a class to learn about the product firsthand and get your hands on that, that should be available before the end of the year, I'm delighted to say. So that is very much coming. So let me check I haven't missed anyone. Okay, I can't see anyone, but if you have submitted a question and I have missed it, I do apologize. And please feel free, if you do have any questions, to email me at cpurcell@epicor.com. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have about the product if I have missed them. So I apologize for that. Okay, so all it remains for me to do is to thank you very much for your time today. And I hope you got something useful out of the session. And I look forward to speaking to you all again soon. I hope you have a great day. Thank you.